Hello YouTube, Dave here again, back with another viewer question video. So a little while ago I had someone ask me what process do I go through when I go to write an adventure, or how do I write adventures if I'm running stuff that's homebrewed. And I thought it'd be a fun question to do a video on, actually. So because I just recently wrote an adventure that I'm hoping to be running probably, well, hopefully within the next within the next few days, actually, the time that I'm recording this. And this will actually probably go up before I end up running the adventure, so I'm hoping that nobody that I'm running it for pays too close attention to this video, but I'm not overly worried about it. So for me personally, the way that I write adventures, and this is by no means saying that this is how it should be done. In fact, I probably do it in a more convoluted or detail-obsessed version of writing adventure than I really probably ever need to. But I wanted to sort of go through my process. So the first thing is that the way that I write adventures is essentially derived from all the way back when I was hoping to submit some adventures for publication in Dungeon Magazine. Back in the day, at least during the Paizo era of Dungeon Magazine, they actually used a lot of submissions for their magazines. Now, their big major storylines or story arcs, if they had those in their issues, those would be done by specially selected staff members or specially selected writers. But there was a lot of freelance stuff that they would publish. I was actually working on some stuff to send into the magazine around the time that they announced that they were going to be, that Wizards of the Coast announced that they were going to be ceasing publication of the physical magazine, which really was unfortunate because I was really happy with the adventure that I was writing. But from that point forward, I just sort of got stuck with doing the sort of the adventure layout that I would typically do if I was looking to submit something. Not that I would do that now. I honestly don't think that the stuff I do is really good enough to warrant that at this point in time, and I was probably cautiously, or not cautiously, but just way too optimistic back then. But anyway, but Dungeon Magazine is sort of where I started to get my just the format for how I would write adventures, and I use published adventures just sort of as the template. So that's how, again, I go to write things. So this adventure that I have here is meant to be the beginning of a new campaign with first level characters, and I'm actually using the 4th edition, I'm using 5th edition rules, but I'm using the 4th edition world, the Nentir Vale and Narath in particular, for my campaign, because I'm going to be running stuff online at least until things sort of revert back to normal and local game stores open up again. But doing this stuff online, I want to keep things to be relatively short and not necessarily self-contained, fully self-contained, but I don't know how much of a sweeping narrative I would want to tell at this rate, because after a few months, if stores do open back up again, that's likely where I will be going to run my games in person, and with those ones, that's when it would be easier to do it with sort of this overarching story. So for right now, the fact that the 4th edition world is like points of light in an unforgiving wilderness kind of situation, where adventurers are a big part of daily life for solving issues that are bothering these smaller settlements, because like huge cities like Waterdeep or Sharn or Greyhawk, they probably wouldn't exist, at least not at the scale that they do in Narath. So I just kind of want the idea that the player characters go into town, they have job postings that they can look at and choose which one to go for. So that's what I'm doing here. Another thing that I am a big fan of is giving the players options, letting the players sort of decide which route that they want to take, especially early on before you get into heavy story-oriented stuff. So this is the adventure here. So this is the first page. I just give the have the title at the top, obviously, and then I actually went into a little bit of description on it, even though, again, this is something that I was only running for myself. I might post this on my Facebook page. I haven't really decided yet, because I haven't done any like maps or anything up like that, because I'm not too worried about that for something that I'm just going to be running online. But it does at least explain itself a little bit. And I do have sort of the introductory blurb, which I just use in brackets here. In other things, like if I were publishing this on my Facebook page, I would probably highlight this in just sort of a light gray so that it really stands apart. But because I was printing this off to run, I don't want to drain the ink in my printer quite that quickly, because that stuff is unnecessarily expensive. But I do have a little bit of blurb here, just to read to the players when they first start the campaign. It has them going to the town of Fallcrest and going into one of the inns, and just securing a room, and all the mundane stuff is just sort of handled in the flavor text. However, when they come back down, I don't want to jump right into the adventure portion of it necessarily right away. These are new players, or not new players, but new characters, and some of these people are playing together for the first time, so they want there to be a little bit of a feeling out process, and just a sense that they can just do stuff that's fun. So I actually decided to write some stuff that they could do in the tavern, because they're going to arrive at night, and it'll be like the idea is that they've been walking through like just this cold driving rain for the last few days, so they want to relax a bit and enjoy themselves. So I have a few things here that they can do. So I have a little section on gambling. For this one I did focus on cards, but truthfully the same set of guidelines that I used here could also be used for dice games or something like that, with a little bit of modification. But I did focus on cards specifically, because that's just sort of the more iconic image that you see of like the bar fight scene, where you have the card table being flipped over and cards flying. So that's the one that I went with there. I did also set up a thing for strength-based characters. So this gambling is sort of for characters that are more sly and more, based on like charismatic stuff. That I went with there. I do have an arm wrestling one for the more strength-based characters if they want to do something to have fun there. So there's all the stats necessary for it, and the athletics checks. Whoops. So athletics checks, the bonus that the individual gets that they'd be going up against, and just the rules for doing this arm wrestling contest. This is all stuff that I just made up myself, so it's probably not the best method of going about it, but I thought it was one that might make sense. Essentially, they have to get 3 consecutive rounds of victory over the other person in this contested athletics check. A natural 1 is considered to be 2 losses, and a natural 20 is considered to be 2 successes. Just to sort of make those, even though with skill checks, natural 1s and natural 20s are not automatic, failure or success, I still thought it would be just something that makes those rolls a little bit better. If the match lasts for a number of rounds equal to 10 plus the con modifier of the participant, 10 plus their con modifier, the participant needs to start making constitution checks to avoid fatigue. And essentially, if they fail their constitution roll, then they actually make their athletics check at disadvantage. It's just, if the thing goes too long, it's a way of preventing it from just really getting too drawn out by having the disadvantage there. If it goes way too long, and just what happens if they go through, and the player character wins, the person is gracious in defeat, orders them a drink, and it's all good. For the more dexterous characters, I decided to also throw in a dart game. So again, the rules are probably not the best, but I figured it's just an easy way to let dex-based characters, and all this stuff is designed to earn a little bit of coin as well, because like gambling, they obviously are betting money and winning or losing money. With the arm wrestling, they can essentially take bets and get a portion of the winnings. And with darts, it can be a friendly game, or they can put money on it. So I have just some information on if they do decide to put money on it, and even things of what happens if they lose and try to cheat the person out of the money that they would have had to have given over, or if they don't have the money. So I just, again, tried to come up with just try to cover some of those bases. The next thing that I have is just simply carousing. There's information for a drinking contest, where each time they take a new drink, they make a Constitution saving throw. Its starting DC is 10, and then each additional round afterwards, it goes up by 1. So like on the second round, it would be DC 11, DC 12, and it would sort of go on like that. They can also, if they don't want to take part in the drinking game, which is really just to get free drinks, they can also try to learn some rumors. So I came up with a few different rumors here, and they are either true, false, or partially true, and just try to come up with... So this stuff here is mainly sowing the seeds for potentially some future stuff. I don't have much of it really thought out or developed at this point in time, but for example, so one of the first things here, or one of these things, has another band of adventurers, which I'm hoping will become like a rival party, known as the Stormcrows. This says that they killed this mighty white dragon, and well, that could be true, or it could be the facts could be a little bit skewed. There's some things that, like one of the ones here, can pertain to one of the actual scenarios, or one of the actual little mini quests that the characters can do in this party, or this adventure, and so on. So I came up with 6 of those. If they spend some time interacting and role playing, and just want to learn some stuff about the town, then they make a successful investigation check, or I think it was investigation or persuasion, to learn some stuff, and then they can roll a d6, and that's the rumor that I would give them. And then eventually the idea is that they would look for works, because they're arriving at night, they want to rest, dry off, just get their clothes, and everything dried out and everything, and then the next morning they can look at the job board. So with the job board, again, I want there to be some choices that the players make. Like, I could just have one of these and expand on a little bit further and maybe make it a full-fledged adventure in of itself. But honestly, I just wanted to focus again on shorter, easier to digest little mini, like, side quests. And this is partially inspired by the bounty hunting stuff that I've been working on and off for the last few weeks. But I just really like the shorter mini quests, because it's just easier to do a couple of those to fill time. And if I'm only running for 3 hours, I don't want to get... I'd like to try to make it so that they can finish what they started in a session. And since I also run monthly games when we get back to normal, when it goes back to running in stores, then this is probably the format that I might stick with if I'm running stuff of my own design. And odds are I'll probably continue this this setting forward with when that happens. But anyway, so I have 3 little side quests here. Each of these entries is what will be posted on the board itself. And because, again, I'm doing this online, I would probably have just done these as like separate handouts that I could have, just passed out to the players. But in this one, I'm just going to keep it all together, and I could just read it, or at the very least, I could put it in like an email and send it to everybody. But so these are the 3 quests. It's like what they would actually write to try to get people to take the quests, and it's says who it's posted by and where they can be found. So we have one with bandits affecting a merchant's shipments. We have one with a missing husband whose wife is concerned. He's a hunter and hasn't been back for he's several days overdue. So that they can look at that one as well. And then we have some goblins that have been spotted nearby some of the farms that are just sort of outside of the town. So that's what we have there. And then the next sections are essentially just the write-ups for those little quests. So the first one here would be if they take the bandit one, and it just details the interaction that they can have with the person who posted it, what they're willing to offer, what the maximum that they're going to be able to offer is, as well as some other incentives. So, for example, the characters could earn more gold if they recover some of the goods that have been stolen. If they're able to do that, then they can earn an extra reward on top of what they would normally get. There's a possibility for them to get a discount at her store if she brings back the bandit leader, so that they can face justice in town, so that everyone can see, or more to the point, so that she can see. Just things like that. So then we also have just the little bit of description of what faces them. So it's going to be about a 2-day journey for this one. and just what they can encounter. So this is one of the scenarios that actually has a couple of encounters. So there's one that takes place on the first day, just so that something happens, and then I've got the information with the bandits here as well. I did forget to close that bracket off, so let's just do that now because that's the end of the flavor text, and I can make that correction when I go back to the actual text file. But so there we have just how that goes, information on the road itself, or the setup for it, and then we get into the creatures. So which ones that I'm using. So, and this is something again that I've gotten from the published adventures, like in Dungeon Magazine. Essentially, I italicize and put in bold the names of the creature stats, like that I would be using. So in the case of this one, we have 5 bandits and then 1 bandit captain. And those are the names of the NPCs in the back of the monster manual for 5th edition. So that's what I would be using there. And then as well as like what their tactics are, and any, like, if so for some of them are trying to ambush, for example. And what happens if the bandit leader is forced into a situation where he wants to beg for his life, and sort of what can happen there if the characters try to again deceive him, things like that. So I just wanted to take that stuff into consideration. Then I have the development, which is sort of what happens next, or what could possibly happen next. In this case, it's information on where to find the stolen goods, essentially, and what the treasure is that they find, if they manage to find the stolen goods as well. And then I just have a little bit of information on concluding the quest. So this is when the characters go to turn it in, and what things can happen as a result of their actions. So in this case, did they bring the bandit captain back alive? Did they recover the goods? Did they do neither? Did they do like one or the other? So that's just sort of the information there. And then I have In Search of the Hunter, so that was the next one. And again, this one has a little bit more potential for role-playing in it, because they may want to get a little bit more information out of the person that posted it. So I just have some questions and answers, possible questions, and what the answers would be to them, which is something that happens in these adventures as well. And then again, just the write-up, the information, the creature that you may encounter, the development, and back to the concluding the quest. And then just the goblin threat, which is again, it's just more of the same sort of design. So that's just again the way that I lay everything out. This one here has them interacting with an NPC, and instead of doing the questions and answers, these are just the bullet points of what information could be given to the characters if they asked certain leading questions. And again, just in case, I have some information here on what will happen if the characters try certain types of skill checks. The person that posted this particular job is the lord of the town himself. So, for example, if the characters use persuasion, then something, they might be able to get a little bit more as a reward if they wish to do so. But if they try to do intimidate, then that can go really, really poorly, because this is someone who doesn't respond well to threats, or, someone trying to throw their weight around, or, try to, again, intimidate the leader of this town. So there's information on what can happen there as well. And then finally, going to where the farm is, and the things that can happen there. So that's just, again, concluding the quest. And then I have a little section on concluding the adventure, which is sort of what happens when the characters complete the quest available to them here. So my hope is that they will do all 3 of them, but it's just a matter of which order that they do them in. If they decide that one's just really not interesting, then I can always work on developing a few others. So that's not a huge issue. So that's the adventure there. However, with this type of campaign that I want to run, for example, I kind of want there to be just a reputation system put in place, and I don't know if there's anything honestly in the 5th edition books. Xanathar's Guide could have something along those lines. It's honestly been a while since I looked through that book, because I've been running my D&D games away from home, so I've been running it at a store, and I sometimes would have to go to work first or after, and I didn't want to have too much stuff with me, so I just never really bothered to look at that book. But I do have just a little bit of a reputation thing here, ways that they can improve it or possibly decrease it, and what happens when they reach a certain level of reputation. So they start with 10, and the way that they present themselves from the very beginning can raise or lower that somewhat in minor increments. But then, as they progress and start to do things in the town itself, again, it can impact their reputation. So if they're known for constantly wanting to negotiate higher fees for them doing the jobs, it can actually have a negative impact on people's perceptions of them, to the point where they may start to get tired of dealing with them and may start to, essentially, the idea is that they may start to lowball them from the very beginning, because the rewards are never posted on the jobs. It's if they're interested, they have to go talk to the person that posted it, and then they can negotiate the price there, or they'll tell them how much they're willing to pay, and then the characters can sort of proceed. But if they're known for constantly trying to get more, then the word will spread, and people will start offering less. To the point where they'll lowball them, so that if they do push for more, they can offer them more, but that more that they offer is really just what they would have ordinarily paid if the players didn't have such a reputation of being greedy. If their reputation gets too low, for example, they could even be exiled from town, or possibly even arrested. Things like that. And then the higher the reputation gets, of course, there are benefits to that as well. Discounts at shops, discounts on supplies from spell scrolls or potions, healing, things like that. And if their reputation gets really high, then they can because the idea is that their reputation is based on the town that they're in. But if it gets significantly higher than what the normal maximum would typically be, then they actually would have a reputation that starts at a higher value in nearby settlements, because they've done so much that words of their deeds have sort of gotten out there. So that's basically what I've done for this particular adventure. Now, not every adventure that I design would have an extra subsystem that I'd want to tack into it, but this is how I write adventures. So I like to have some things for them to do, again, some choices, some options for my players, but I like to format it with the text, the read aloud text clearly defined, and then the things like the monsters, just again formatted similar to how you would find them in professional, or not professional but published. Well, I guess professional also works, but for published adventures. So yeah, so for example, now this is an older edition, so they do things a little bit differently, but again, you just sort of see how they, would list the monsters and stuff. So that's basically how I design my adventures. This is sort of the format that I would use for everything that I do. So when it comes to encounters, I would have the basic information as the encounter starts. I would have the creatures explained and their tactics written out in its own section. I would have a separate section for treasure, if they find any, and the developments, so sort of what happens at the end of the combat, and just things like that. So that's how I do it. Now again, I'm not saying that this is the best way to go about it, because there's a very good chance that a lot of this stuff that I worked on isn't really going to come up, and that's something that that can happen and has happened, but I still do it this way anyway. But it's not, like I said, the definitive way. This isn't the way that I think everyone should do it, and again, I would probably say that it's not necessary for people to write these the way that I have gone about or gotten used to doing it. I've seen, and I've actually also, although I don't have any examples of them handy, I have also just done adventures that I had very little prep time for. So essentially, it was just bullet points for how to start the adventure, the scenario, or what things they may be doing, and then the creatures or the encounters that they might have. And the encounters would be something like just encounter 1, 3 orcs one orc shaman, like sort of thing, and then that's it. So that's other ways to do things as well. In general, though, if I have the time, this is how I like to write adventures. But I will admit, there's a lot to it. I mean, it takes several hours going through, and again, it could be all for naught. Like, again, a lot of the stuff that I have written here may never even be, something that could possibly be a question or a concern or a thing that the players would be interested in doing. I just kind of want to have something there. So that's how I do it. But let me know in the comments below, how do you guys design your adventures? Do you write things out thoroughly? Do you use bullet points and just some encounter tables? Or is it sort of a hybrid of the two? Like, I've sort of done that as well in the past, but let me know how you guys go about it. And this is one of those things where there is no wrong answer, and I can't stress that enough. So however you design adventures, if it's what works for you and you and your group have fun, then that's the most important thing. But I still like to know other people's perspectives on how they approach adventure design. So just to recap just a little bit for me, the important thing is player options, player choices, especially to start things off before we get too deep into a potentially long-running story, and just a little bit of variety in things as well. That's sort of like my main priorities, especially at this point in time. But let me know again how you guys sort of go about it, because there's no wrong answer. And everyone's opinions and everyone's methods are absolutely 100% completely valid. So, again, if someone designs things in a way that you don't, be respectful and understand that what works for you doesn't necessarily work for them. So, thanks again for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Take care.